Welcome to today's deep dive. And, today we have a really wild piece of source material on the docket.
Oh, absolutely. It's out there.
Yeah, it's this highly esoteric, like deeply symbolic text called The 12 Gods of Aztec Mythology and Freemasonry, Chapter 3.
Right.
And our mission today is to figure out what possible connection could even exist between ancient Mesoamerican pyramids and the highly secretive, dimly lit halls of Freemasonry.
It's quite the leap.
It really is. So, to do that, I want you to imagine a Venn diagram. Over in the circle on your left, you've got deep antiquity, dense jungles and gods with incredibly complex histories.
Yeah.
And then over the circle on your right, you have the quiet traditions of the Masonic Lodge. So symbolic rituals, geometry, the architecture of the human soul.
Which is such a great phrase, by the way.
Right. And today we're exploring the ultimate archetype that sits right smack in the middle of where those two circles overlap, the master architect.
It is, it's quite the space to stand in, honestly. Because you don't naturally assume there's a bridge between the ancient Aztec pantheon and, the symbolic lodges of what we call speculative masonry.
No, definitely not.
But as we unpack this text, we're going to see that human beings, regardless of where or when they lived, they use very similar architectural and mythic blueprints, to understand their place in the universe.
And to even begin to understand this blueprint, we have to start with the central figure of this document. The source material spends just a lot of time on a deity that kind of anchors this whole comparison.
Yes. And if you were to picture the visual backdrop of this conversation, you would want to see ancient Mesoamerican stone carvings slowly blending into a vast starry night sky.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because that is the essence of Quetzalcoatl. He is a deity of unmatched reverence in that culture. And the name itself gives us his primary image, which is the feathered serpent.
Yeah.
So a snake adorned with the long, radiant emerald plumes of the Quetzal bird.
Okay, let's unpack this, because a snake with feathers is, it's a striking image. But it's not just a cool piece of mythological art, right?
Yeah.
The text treats this almost like a visual code.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's fascinating here is how this image is inherently initiatic. It's this paradoxical fusion of opposites.
Okay.
The serpent has long been associated with the earth, with fertility, with the heavy nature of matter. In a lot of Eastern traditions, for instance, you'll hear this described as Kundalini energy.
Wait, let's ground that for a second. When you say Kundalini, you mean what exactly?
Yeah.
Like that dormant, coiled energy at the base of the spine that people talk about in yoga?
That's the one, yeah. It represents the primal, grounded, biological force of nature.
Okay.
It's the lower world, the dust, the physical reality we all walk around in every day.
Right.
But then you add the feathers, and the plumes of the Quetzal bird, they belong entirely to the realm of the heavens, to the air.
To the sky.
Yeah, to divine ascent in the spirit. So, by uniting the creeping serpent and the soaring bird, Quetzalcoatl becomes a physical bridge. In mythological studies, we actually call this an axis mundi.
An axis mundi, I've heard the term, but break down how that actually functions in a myth.
Think of it as a world tree, or like a center pole that literally holds the universe together.
Okay.
It connects the underworld, the earth, and the heavens above. So Quetzalcoatl isn't just a god you pray to. He represents the actual path of human transformation.
Gotcha.
The code basically says that you can start in the dust, driven by basic animal instincts like a serpent, and eventually rise up, taking flight, adorned in the feathers of divine illumination.
Hold on, though. I'm tracking with you, but I feel like we need to address the elephant in the room here.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Right, because when you say Aztec gods to most people, they definitely do not immediately think of divine illumination and inner peace.
No, they don't.
A society famous for building pyramids of skulls and, conducting mass human sacrifice doesn't exactly scream enlightened harmony.
That is a very fair point, and it's a major misconception that the text actually clears up. Yeah. The broader Aztec Empire, particularly in its later stages, was indeed highly imperialistic and heavily involved in human sacrifice.
Right.
But Quetzalcoatl, as an ancient archetype, is completely unique. The source actually highlights that he abhorred human sacrifice.
Wait, really? That completely shatters my mental image of Mesoamerica. He was fundamentally against it.
Completely against it. According to the foundational myths, he promoted offerings of flowers and birds and incense instead of human lives.
Wow.
His priesthood was celibate and highly disciplined, and his temples were centers of wisdom, astronomy, agriculture, not war.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, the theology states he was the son of the dual creator god, and the story of how he creates humanity is just wild.
Okay, tell me.
He literally goes down into the underworld Mictlan and retrieves the shattered bones of previous worlds.
Does the literal descent into darkness to, like, retrieve the broken pieces of the past?
Yes, he takes these broken bones, infuses them with divine blood, and creates humanity. But his work doesn't stop at creation. He is the great civilizer. He brings human beings maize for agriculture. He brings writing. He brings the calendar system to track time. And he establishes a code of moral law.
Okay, so he takes this chaotic underworld energy and he gives it rules, the calendar a shape.
Exactly.
He's essentially drafting a blueprint for civilization.
Yeah.
And if you're drafting a blueprint, well, you're an architect. Which brings us right into the core of the Masonic connection in the text.
It really does, because central to the esoteric interpretations of Freemasonry is the image of the master builder.
Right.
Now, earlier I mentioned speculative masonry. For those who might not know, operative masons were the actual historical stonemasons who built the massive cathedrals of Europe.
The guy's literally cutting stone.
Exactly. Speculative masonry takes their tools, so the square, the compass, the plumb line, and uses them as philosophical metaphors.
Oh, okay.
Metaphors for building a moral and spiritual life. And the central figure of that entire speculative system is Hiram Abiff.
The chief architect of Solomon's Temple.
That's the one. In Masonic allegory, Hiram Abiff embodies total devotion to divine principles, unyielding discipline, sacred knowledge.
Right.
He lays out the designs on his trestle board so that the spiritual life of the community has structure, a place to reside. Quetzalcoatl does the exact same thing for his people through calendars and glyphs and ritual.
I have to play the skeptic here, though.
Go for it.
Are we just, like, retrofitting our modern Western understanding of Masonry onto ancient Aztecs? I mean, humans build things. They need architects. How does the text prove this isn't just a basic coincidence?
That is exactly the right question to ask. And if it were just about building stuff, yeah, it would be a coincidence.
Right.
But it's the narrative arc of their lives, the specific psychological sequence they go through. That's what makes scholars pay attention.
Okay, what's the sequence?
In the Masonic legend, Hiram Abiff is famously betrayed by 3 of his own workers who demand the secret word of a master mason.
Yeah.
When he refuses to compromise his integrity, he's struck down, killed, hastily buried, before eventually being raised up.
And Quetzalcoatl.
Quetzalcoatl is also betrayed. He is tricked and disgraced by rival forces. And because of his moral purity and his spiritual mission, he's forced into exile.
Oh, wow.
He undergoes this period of intense asceticism and temptation, and then, according to the legend, he voluntarily departs the world. He travels east, sets himself adrift on a raft of serpents, and ultimately sets himself aflame.
He burns himself alive.
He burns away his physical form, yes.
But he doesn't just, like, turn to ash and end the story there.
No. From that fire, he transforms into the morning star, the planet Venus. And before he disappears into the sky, he leaves a promise that one day he will return.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
That cycle of descent, death, and resurrection. I mean, just so deeply ingrained in human psychology, isn't it?
It is the universal archetype of redeemed light. We see it in Christian messianic themes with the return of Christ. We see it in Islamic traditions with the hidden imam.
Yeah.
And we see it heavily in Rosicrucian and Hermetic traditions, which are philosophical systems deeply tied to alchemy and, the transformation of the soul.
Yeah.
The idea is always that the grand teacher, the ultimate wisdom, is lost or hidden, but will return to restore cosmic harmony.
And what the text really emphasizes is how a Masonic lodge functions as a physical space for this. The lodge isn't just a meeting hall. It's a machine built to make you experience that exact cycle.
That's a great way to put it. A machine. In the Master Mason degree, the ritual uses sensory deprivation, spatial movement, and this powerful allegory so the initiate doesn't just hear the story of Hiram Abiff.
They live it.
They psychologically experience the death of the old self and the raising of the new. It dramatizes the inner return of the light. It is literally Quetzalcoatl's journey of burning away the lower self, and acted in real time.
I love that idea of an architect building with human character rather than just stone. But the source material notes something else about how they built things physically that totally blew my mind.
Oh, the temples.
Yeah. Because a true architect, like a divine builder, doesn't just use solid materials. They build using the invisible forces of nature.
You're referring to the manifestation of Quetzalcoatl, known as Quetzalcoatl.
Exactly. I was looking at these notes about how they actually built the temples. When Quetzalcoatl manifests as Quetzalcoatl, he is the god of wind.
Right.
He is the force that animates the cosmos with breath and motion. And when the ancients built temples specifically dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, they didn't build standard square pyramids. They built them in a conical shape. They were completely round.
Deliberately round.
Yeah.
And the mechanism behind that choice is just profound.
Right. The text explains they made them round specifically to avoid wind resistance. I mean, think of a standard square building in a heavy windstorm.
Takes a beating.
Exactly. The flat walls fight the wind. They create immense turbulence, pressure, and resistance. But a round temple doesn't fight the wind. It accepts it. It redirects it.
Yeah.
They use this ancient aerodynamic design purely so that the physical form of the building would perfectly serve its sacred function.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the symbolism of wind is foundational to almost every major spiritual tradition, and it directly answers how transformation actually happens.
How so?
In biblical and philosophical traditions, wind is known as ruach in Hebrew or pneuma in Greek. It translates literally to breath or spirit.
Right.
It is the invisible force of consciousness.
Because you can't see the wind, but you can see what it moves, like you see the trees bend.
Precisely. In the Mesoamerican myth, Quetzalcoatl breathes life into clay forms to create living beings. He's the invisible force that physically blows the clouds away to clear the path in the sky for the sun to rise.
Wow.
He activates potential. Now, map that onto the Masonic concept of spirit animating matter.
Okay, so if the initiate is the square building fighting the wind, how does the lodge turn them into the round temple?
Well, think about the very first degree in Freemasonry. The candidate is brought into the lodge in a state of darkness, blindfolded.
They're like unformed clay.
Exactly, unformed clay. So how are they spiritually quickened? It doesn't happen with hammer and chisel. It happens through breath.
Right.
It happens through spoken words, what esoteric traditions call the logos. And it happens through the sudden restoration of light.
Yeah.
The lodge operates through unseen, subtle forces. Vocal vibrations, symbolic gestures, moral instruction. Those act as the wind. That wind breathes life into the candidate, transforming them from the inside out.
That's incredible. You walk in as a rigid defensive stone, just fighting the elements, and the ritual is the wind teaching you how to let the spirit flow around and through you.
And that emergence into the light brings us right back to Quetzalcoatl's most enduring symbol, the one he transforms into after the fire, Venus, the morning star.
Right, the morning star. And the text points out that this brings up a concept in esoteric tradition that is just wildly misunderstood by people on the outside.
Oh boy. Yes.
We have to pause and carefully explain this because it mentions Luciferian light.
It does. And understandably, for a lot of people, that word sets off massive cultural alarm bells.
Yeah, you hear that and you immediately think of satanic worship or dark magic.
Right. But the text is very clear on the historical and linguistic context here. We have to look at the words. The word Lucifer literally translates from Latin simply as the light bringer, lux and fair.
Just a bringer of light.
That's it. In ancient astronomy, it was just the name for the planet Venus when it appeared in the morning. Venus exists in a very specific liminal space. It is the incredibly bright star you see on the threshold between the pitch-black darkness of night and the rising of the full sun.
So it's not the sun itself, it's the herald.
Exactly. It heralds the light. In esoteric traditions, Luciferian light just refers to the initial revealer of wisdom. It is the guide that calls the initiate to wake up before the full illumination of day actually arrives.
Okay, that makes sense.
In the Masonic Lodge, this concept is mirrored by the blazing star. It's a prominent symbol usually depicted right in the center of the lodge floor. It represents divine providence or guidance.
Oh.
In mystical Jewish traditions, it's akin to the Shekinah, the indwelling presence of the divine. So Quetzalcoatl, as the morning star, is the perfect emblem of that initial guiding light.
What I find so compelling is that this isn't just like philosophical poetry. It's literally mapped out in physical stone. The text compares the layout of these ancient spaces to modern lodges. Let's look at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent at Teotihuacan. This was built around 200 CE, right?
Yes, centuries before the Aztec Empire even existed.
So at this temple, they built it with deliberate symbolic intent. At the very base of the pyramid, down near the dirt, you have these massive stone serpents with open jaws lining the bottom.
Right, the earth level.
But as your eyes move higher up the structure, the architecture changes. You start seeing these plumed, feathered serpent heads emerging from intricate flowered stone frames.
The physical structure literally forces your gaze into an ascent. You start at the material earth with the creeping serpent, and you are drawn upward to the feathered, flowering divine.
And then the text puts that right next to a Masonic tracing board. Now, a tracing board, for those who might not know, is essentially a visual map used in lodges.
Yeah, a teaching tool.
Right. Think of it like a highly symbolic coded poster or carpet that helps teach new members the architecture of the soul. And it does the exact same thing as the pyramid.
Walk us through the visual of the board.
Well, at the very bottom, you have the checkerboard pavement, the black and white squares representing the duality of earthly life. So good and evil, joy and sorrow. That's the base level.
Right.
Then you have the two great pillars, Jeshurun and Boaz, which
Right.
represent strength and establishment, that act as a gateway.
Yes.
And moving up from there, you have the winding stair that guides the mind upward, away from the checkered floor, reaching toward the heavens, toward the all-seeing eye.
It's identical in function. Both the Mesoamerican temple and the Masonic tracing board are what we call didactic. They are teaching machines.
Right.
They instruct the seeker without using a single written word. They rely entirely on geometry and physical space. Quetzalcoatl isn't just a character in a story. He is the template of sacred space. Just as the lodge isn't merely a room with checkered floors, it is the architectural plan of human development.
So what does this all mean? I mean, if I'm listening to this right now, I'm not an ancient Toltec priest building pyramids, and I might not be a Freemason studying tracing boards. How does the text distill the essence of Quetzalcoatl for the everyday individual?
The text makes it beautifully clear, I think. Quetzalcoatl represents the call to become the master builder of your own internal landscape,
I love that.
to marry your intellect with your virtue. He teaches us that true knowledge has to be earned through discipline. Furthermore, true authority doesn't come from forcing your will on others, like a conqueror. It comes from interior purity and structural integrity.
But I think the most memorable insight from this whole document is how he handles the darker, baser parts of human nature. Because in Western mythology, what do we usually do with dragons or serpents?
We slay them. Think of St. George and the dragon. The Western psychological model is often about conquering the base nature. You take a lance and you put it through the heart of the beast. You suppress the animal instinct.
Right. It's all about repression, killing the ugly parts of ourselves. But Quetzalcoatl offers a completely different psychological model. He doesn't slay the snake.
No, he doesn't. He adorns it. He becomes the serpent with feathers. This is the profound difference between suppression and integration.
Wow.
Psychology tells us that if you just repress the animal part of your nature, the shadow, it eventually bites you. It rebels. But if you integrate it, if you take that primal, grounded energy and give it spiritual direction, give it feathers, it flies.
That is such a vivid image.
To be the master architect of your own life means you must be both firmly grounded in reality and soaring in your aspirations. You don't reject the earth to reach the sky.
You connect them. You become the axis mundi,
Exactly. You become the bridge.
which is such a powerful functional architecture for the human soul. But of course, you can't have light without a shadow.
This raises an important question, and it's exactly where the source material points us for the next chapter, because Quetzalcoatl does not exist in a vacuum.
Right.
Every architect has to deal with entropy. Quetzalcoatl has a dark counterpart,
Oh, who is that?
a deity named Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror.
The smoking mirror.
Yeah, he is Quetzalcoatl's cosmic rival, and his very name, the smoking mirror, typically made of polished black obsidian, suggests illusion, distortion, and the darker reflections of the human soul.
Oh, that's heavy.
If Quetzalcoatl is the light that guides us up the winding staircase, Tezcatlipoca is the shadow that forces us to confront our own reflection in the darkest parts of the lodge.
It's the ultimate cliffhanger. You can't truly understand the light bringer until you understand the darkness he's illuminating. You have to integrate the shadow.
The journey requires both. The architecture isn't complete without acknowledging the smoking mirror.
It really isn't. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to bring all of these ancient myths, these secret lodge symbols, and this incredible geometry right back into your world right now.
Yeah.
Think back to that Venn diagram we started with. Think about the concept of the divine architect, bridging the heavy, grounded reality of the earth with the boundless potential of the sky. Not by killing the serpent, but by giving it feathers.
Beautifully said.
But most importantly, I want you to think about Quetzalcoatl, the god of wind.
Mm,
And those perfectly round conical temples, remember why they were built that way. A square building fights the wind, creating friction, turbulence, and stress.
right.
But a round temple accepts the wind. It redirects it.
Yeah.
It was designed specifically so it wouldn't resist the invisible forces of nature. So here is my question for you to mull over today. What does the architecture of your daily routine look like?
That's a great question.
Are you building a life out of rigid defensive walls? Are you constantly fighting against the wind, resisting the invisible forces, the sudden changes, and the inevitable storms of your life with a stubborn ego? Or are you designing your days like a master architect? Are you building a structure that allows inspiration, breath, and new knowledge to flow around and through you seamlessly? Something to think about as you construct your day.